They say the woods have eyes, but sometimes they also have voices. Voices that beckon and never let go. This is the story of a group of friends, Mark, Emily, and David, 3 college buddies who, seeking an escape from city life, decided to tackle the legendary Whispering Pines Trail in the remote wilderness of the Olympic National Forest in Washington State. They were looking for adventure. They found something far older and far more insidious than any legend: the Olympic National Forest was vast, ancient, and notoriously unforgiving. Mark, the unofficial leader and outdoors enthusiast, assured Emily and David that this challenging but rewarding 3-day hike would be unforgettable. They set off early, their backpacks heavy, spirits high. The towering Douglas firs and moss-draped cedars quickly swallowed them, plunging them into a world of dappled sunlight and the earthy scent of pine. The first day was exhilarating. They navigated winding paths, crossed bubbling streams, and marveled at the sheer scale of the wilderness. They set up camp by a clear river, cooking hot dogs over a crackling fire, sharing jokes and forgetting the stresses of college life. Unease began on the second day. The trail, previously well marked, started to become confusing. The painted blazes on the trees seemed to vanish or appear in places that made no sense. Their GPS lost signal, the compass spun erratically. Must be some kind of mineral deposit, David muttered, trying to sound scientific, but his voice lacked conviction. Then came the sounds. A faint, almost imperceptible whispering from deep within the trees, just beyond their sight. It sounded like multiple voices, soft and sibilant, just on the edge of hearing, like secrets being traded on a breeze that wasn't there. Mark, initially dismissive, grew quiet. Emily clutched her hiking poles tighter. They tried to ignore it, pressing on, but the whispers grew. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding them, sometimes forming what sounded like distorted words, utterly indecipherable but deeply unsettling. "Are you guys hearing that?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. David nodded, pale-faced. As dusk approached, they realized they were profoundly lost. The trail had vanished completely. They were deep in a part of the forest no map seemed to cover. They decided to make camp, fear now a cold knot in their stomachs. As they pitched their tent, the whispers intensified, growing louder, clearer. They could almost make out specific names. Mark, Emily, David, whispered from the surrounding darkness. The climax arrived after midnight. The whispers outside their tent were no longer faint. They were a cacophony, a swirling chorus of frantic, desperate voices. The tent fabric began to press inward, as if unseen hands were pushing against it from all sides. A wave of icy cold swept through their small shelter. Suddenly, a series of violent taps struck the tent fabric directly behind Mark's head. Tap, tap, tap. Then, a low, guttural moan emanated from just outside, a sound of profound agony. Terror paralyzed them. They huddled together, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. The tapping moved around the tent, encircling them. The whispers turned into a single agonizing plea, chanted over and over. Come with us. Suddenly, the side of the tent ripped open with a loud tear. A blinding white light streamed in, illuminating the dense trees outside. Through the tear, Mark saw it. Not clear figures, but a swirling mass of light and shadow, vaguely human-shaped, reaching in with long tendril-like arms. The faces within the light were indistinct, yet he could feel their desperate hunger. Mark, Emily, and David screamed. They scrambled out of the tent through the other side, abandoning everything, running blindly through the dark, unforgiving forest, not daring to look back. They ran until their lungs burned, until the first rays of dawn pierced through the thick canopy, bringing with them a sliver of hope and sanity. They eventually stumbled onto a logging road and were picked up by a passing timber truck, disheveled, terrified and empty-handed. They never spoke of what truly happened in the Olympic National Forest. They just say they got lost and had a bad experience. But sometimes, when the wind whispers through the trees, or when they hear a faint, distant moan, they shiver, remembering the voices that called their names and the desperate plea, "Come with us." They know the whispering pines still remember them. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and some secrets, buried deep in the wilderness, never truly stay buried. This is the story of Mia, Chloe, and Ben, 3 urban explorers, thrill seekers looking for an adrenaline rush far from the concrete jungle. Their target? An old, supposedly abandoned ranger station deep in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. They were seeking adventure and forgotten history. What they found was a chilling reminder that some places aren't just empty. There, waiting, the ranger station was legendary among urban exploration forums, a remote outpost used for fire watch, suddenly abandoned in the 1970s after an unexplained incident. Mia, the planner, Chloe, the cautious one, and Ben, the resident videographer, armed with his high-tech drone and night vision camera, were determined to uncover its secrets. They hiked for hours, their path winding through dense, rocky terrain. The forest here felt ancient, silent, its trees gnarled and seemingly watchful. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. They finally found it, hidden amongst a cluster of old-growth pines, a small, dilapidated cabin, its windows broken, its porch collapsing. A tall, rusting fire tower loomed behind it, a skeletal sentinel against the gray sky. The inside of the cabin was even more unsettling. Dust covered everything, and personal effects were scattered as if the occupants had left in a hurry. An old, overturned coffee cup, a half-eaten can of beans on a table, a faded map pinned to a wall. The calendar was stuck on October 1978. As Ben set up his drone, Mia found an old leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with frantic, increasingly erratic entries from a ranger named Thomas. He wrote of strange lights in the sky, unsettling sounds in the woods at night, and a growing paranoia among the small ranger team. His last entry simply read, ****, they're watching. They're getting closer, ****. Suddenly, Ben's drone, which had just lifted off, lost signal and crashed with a clatter somewhere in the dense trees behind the cabin. "Great," Ben muttered, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous edge. "Guess I'm going in after it." As Ben ventured into the woods, Mia and Chloe continued exploring the cabin. They found a small locked cellar door under the floorboards. Chloe, despite her caution, felt an overwhelming urge to open it. As she fiddled with the rusty latch, she heard a faint scraping sound coming from directly beneath it. Scrape, scrape, like something trying to claw its way out. Chloe recoiled, her face pale. Mia, hearing the sound too, pointed her flashlight at the door. The scraping continued, followed by a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate. Through the very floorboards. Just then, Ben burst back into the cabin, his face ashen. "I found it, but something else. There's a pit out there. A huge, deep hole, and I heard something moving in it." He stammered, pointing frantically back towards the woods. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the main door of the cabin, making them all jump. The old wooden door, previously ajar, was now slammed shut. They tried the handle, but it was jammed. They were trapped. From the cellar, the growling intensified, accompanied by the sounds of wood splintering. The floorboards above the cellar began to crack. From outside, they heard a heavy thudding approaching the cabin, slow and deliberate, shaking the ground. Terror seized them. They ran to the windows, but they were boarded up or too small to escape. The cellar door below their feet began to groan ominously, as if something incredibly strong was pushing from beneath. Then, From the broken window closest to them, a long, incredibly thin, gloved hand slowly reached in, its fingers twitching, beckoning them. The glove looked like old, worn leather. The hand was attached to an arm that seemed to stretch unnaturally, impossibly far into the room from the outside darkness. Mia, Chloe, and Ben screamed. They retreated into the furthest corner of the cabin, huddling together as the wood splintered. The growling intensified, and the tapping at the windows began. They waited for dawn in terror, not knowing what would reach them first, the thing from the pit, the thing from the cellar, or the thing at the window. When the first rays of light finally pierced the dense canopy, the sounds faded. The door unjammed. They scrambled out, abandoning everything, and ran blindly back through the forest until they found their car. They never spoke of what truly happened, inventing a story about a bad fall. But sometimes when they hear a faint growl, or see an old glove, they shiver, remembering the ranger station. They know some places should never be visited, and some secrets should remain buried. And some hands just want to collect their due. They say a scenic view can clear your mind. But what if the view is endless and what you see looking back isn't part of the scenery? Asterisk. This is the story of Chris, Liam, and Sarah, 3 friends on a cross-country road trip, seeking breathtaking vistas and unforgettable memories. Their journey led them to a remote overlook point in the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon, famous for its panoramic views. They were looking for beauty. They found a chilling perspective on what lies just beyond the visible world. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon as Chris, Liam, and Sarah pulled their old SUV into the gravel parking lot of the Devil's Vista Overlook. The sign was faded, almost illegible, but the view was indeed breathtaking. A vast, deep gorge carved by the mighty Columbia River, the setting sun painting the clouds in fiery oranges and purples. It was eerily quiet, no other cars, no other tourists. Just them and the vast silent expanse. "Okay, this is epic," Liam declared, pulling out his phone for photos. Sarah smiled, taking a deep breath of the crisp, cool air. Chris, however, felt a subtle unease. The silence felt too heavy, the vastness too absolute. They walked to the edge of the viewing platform, a rickety wooden structure that creaked under their weight. They leaned against the railing, gazing out at the endless vista. The sun dipped lower and the shadows deepened, painting the gorge in hues of gray and black. That's when it started. A faint distortion in the air, directly across the gorge, far in the distance, where the forest met the darkening sky. Like heat haze, but there was no heat. It seemed to shimmer, subtly shifting. They all saw it. "What is that?" Sarah whispered, her voice tight. "Must be a weird reflection or something." Chris tried to rationalize, but a prickle of dread ran up his spine. As they watched, the distortion grew. It began to take on a shape, impossibly tall, unnaturally thin, a silhouette against the fading light. It was vague, indistinct, but its form was undeniably humanoid. It stood perfectly still, looking directly across the gorge at them. A profound cold swept over the platform, chilling them to the bone. They tried to move, but a strange paralysis seemed to hold them rooted to the spot, their eyes fixed on the distant figure. The figure across the gorge began to move. It didn't walk. It seemed to glide, slowly, steadily, along the ridgeline, maintaining its distance, always facing them. It was keeping pace with the setting sun, always visible, always watching. "It's following us," Liam whispered, his voice hoarse with terror. "It's not moving, but it's moving." Panic began to set in. They tried to break free from the paralysis, desperate to run, but they were still stuck. The figure continued its silent glide, its presence a suffocating weight. The climax came as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the gorge into near darkness. The distant figure stopped. Its silhouette became sharper, more defined against the inky blackness of the sky. And then, from across the vast, empty gorge, carried on the chilling wind, a faint, high-pitched whisper reached them. It was not a language they recognized, but the sound was filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow, punctuated by what sounded like faint, dry sobs. Suddenly, the paralysis broke. They stumbled back from the railing, gasping for breath. The figure across the gorge remained, its presence a silent torment. They scrambled back to their SUV, fumbling with the keys, their hands shaking uncontrollably. As Chris started the engine, the figure seemed to subtly tilt its head, as if in acknowledgement. They sped away from Devil's Vista, not looking back, driving through the night until the sun rose and the vast, open roads felt safe again. They never spoke of what they saw that night, inventing a story about a flat tire and a terrifying storm. But sometimes, when they gaze out at a panoramic view, or when the wind carries a faint, distant sound, they shiver, remembering the endless vista and the silent, sorrowful watcher on the ridge. They know some views are best left unseen, and some things, once glimpsed, can never be forgotten.